Okay, everyone. So what I wanted to start doing is making a more advanced um, ship crewing video. I'm going to recall um, my protector. Okay, so this is think of this as like an intermediate crewing video for hostiles, only hostiles. PvP and armadas are a different thing. Um, but you may be using the Lieutenant Picard crew that I showed you in the other video, and that's a pretty good video all around crewing for under 35, 35 and under. You hit a ship that's 36 though, and it just won't work. I think I'm going to use a different ship here. So let's go here. Um, and actually, there may be times when another crew will work better for you with even under 35. So I know like the new AE hostels, I put Lieutenant Picard on there because I was hitting level 34 and I saw what he could do. He did okay, but then I put Janeway's crew on there and she did better. The reason she did better is because isolytic damage. Um, so those hostels are a little different. Just depending on the hostel, there may be a more effective crew than Lieutenant Picard's crew, even under 35, but it's always going to be a pretty good all around crew. Um, but you hit level 36 and Lieutenant Picard just stops working, at least his apex barrier does. So you've got a few different options. Now, the first option, I've got it set up here, is Pike Moreau. Oops, don't want to do that. So you want to use Pike in the captain's chair, and he gives you 120%, increases the effectiveness of all officer abilities. So that's these that increase in combat. So he won't improve your miners, but he will improve your warships. Um, his officer ability, which also activates, is he increases the ship XP earned by combat by 40%. So if you're auto grinding to try to level your ships, not a bad officer. Actually, what you want to do, this is the crew for auto grinding to gain ship leveling because Talon increases ship experience gained by 15%. And then there will be as captain, and then him as officer will increase the ship XP earned by combat by 40%. So this is slightly better. But this is the regular setup you're going to have. Pike Moreau, and then either Talon or Chen, just depending on the firing pattern. Usually it's going to be Chen. With interceptors, it's commonly, but even some surveys, Talon. So you just want to play around with it. Um, if you send Chen in and then you send Talon in, um, and you kind of get an idea of the hostiles and what their firing pattern is. And Talon will be better for some of them, but usually, particularly explorers and battleships, it's going to be, and many surveys, it's going to be Chen. And then Talon for interceptors and some surveys. Pike, Moreau, Chen, or Talon. That's a pretty good, that's your bread and butter crew. That will work. Now, they say that PMC stops working at level, here we go, level 52. So it'll work. Talon's abilities stop working over level 51. It works against hostiles of level 51 and under. Notice she is decreasing damage. So that's mitigation, but it's damage mitigation, and that's pretty good. I tend to want to stack a captain's ability, but usually I want some sort of amplification, and then I like heavy mitigation. There are other officers' abilities that maybe will increase your damage, um, and those can also be effective. Um, but mitigation tends to be more effective. So you want to look for heavy mitigation, um, and damage mitigation is about the best you can get. Um, so in the third slot, notice here there's synergy between Pike and Moreau. So she's amplifying his captain's ability. So it's not officers' abilities that get amplified; it's the captain's ability. And in this case, though, his captain's ability just happens to be increasing officers' abilities. So by amplifying his captain's ability, you're also amplifying um, officer abilities. So this is a really good crew setup. We'll talk about below decks in a second. I want to show you another couple crews that you can use. Picard Beverly. So this is the Red Picard, Jean-Luc Picard TNG crew. And Picard Beverly is pretty much interchangeable with Pike Moreau. Um, so you would also use Moreau or Chen. I was using this as a sort of makeshift armada crew. Excuse me. So you saw Gorkon um, there, but you wouldn't use Gorkon for a lot of hostile grinding. You'd use Chen. Chen has the mitigation, um, and that would enable you to take less hull damage. So she decreases the damage done by its energy weapons, not the kinetic weapons. Um, and so Picard Beverly, very similar to Pike. He increases the effectiveness of all officer abilities that trigger in combat by 120%. And this ability receives the same synergy bonus from all TNG officers, regardless of class. Um, so that's a little bonus. His officer ability, he's a little bit. Remember, Pike had the XP bonus. Picard has a little bit more firepower, so he's going to increase your critical hit damage by, in this case, 5%. I think as you upgrade, the captain's abilities typically do not increase as you increase the tiering um, or the leveling of your officer, but the officer's abilities commonly do. Um, so he's only at tier one. I could maybe make this a little better. And if you got him, fully tiered, I would be willing to bet that Picard Beverly will be slightly more effective than um, than Pike Moreau. Um, Similar to Moreau, she has some mitigation. So when fighting hostiles and armadas, Beverly Crusher increases the armor, shield, deflection, and dodge by 150% of the defense. That's something to keep in mind as we talk about below decks. But once again, she's providing synergy. She's providing a little bit more synergy than Moreau does. Um, so this crew will, um, it could slightly outperform Pike Moreau. It's also harder to get. Okay, but we have that one. Then we have Janeway. I'm going to have to repair real quick. Okay. We have Janeway's crew. Now, I'm the advantage is Janeway tends to be relatively easy to acquire. I got her quite early in the game, and I got B'Elanna. B'Elanna is a below decks officer in Janeway's group, and I got her really early on too as a compensation gift. So um, this is notice there's only 7%, but this is an isolytic. It works. There's not a lot of mitigation actually. It's just pummeling with isolytic damage. So notice when you take hull damage from a non-player, hostile, or armada, Catherine Janeway increases your shield mitigation by 13% for 1 round. That's 13%. It's shield mitigation. Um, that's helpful. And notice the synergy is kind of low on this one. Um, but the real benefit from Janeway is when her um, officer ability activates. At the start of combat, Catherine Janeway increases your isolytic cascade damage by 10%. Now, isolytic cascade multiplies your total damage, including isolytic damage, and all research and other bonuses. So a lot of times you're going to see something that says like uh, base officers attack is improved by 100%, and that's good. But what you really want is after all the bonuses have been calculated. So this isolytic cascade damage is top notch, and that's 10%. Now, B'Elanna, when you take damage from a non-player hostile or armada, B'Elanna increases your armor piercing, shield piercing, and accuracy by 250% of attack. We'll talk about that in a second. Um, but notice it's still an attack stat. Other than Janeway's captain's ability, all of these are attack stats. Enterprise E data. Now I put him on there. He increases isolytic cascade damage by 15% versus non-armada hostiles. Remember that isolytic cascade is huge. So between data and Janeway's abilities, and we got a little bit of synergy here for B'Elanna. You can also use, so let's go to group. So I often use these sort. So you can go to group. That's one way of sorting your officers. And you can see that there's several others. Neelix I'll put on the bridge if I'm in the Voyager grinding Hirogen. Um, Harry Kim I tend to stick below decks. But his if you're grinding for reputation, you might consider putting him on the bridge. Um, but Tom Paris is the main one that I might also sometimes use, particularly if you need E data for another crew. Um, when you take damage from a non-player hostile or armada, Tom Paris increases your critical hit damage by 5%. Um, so you might run him as well. Um, but that's Janeway's crew. E data I prefer if he's available. Um, I know what I was going to tell you. On Pike Moreau Chen and Picard Beverly Chen, they stopped working. Um, Chen and Talon stopped working after level 51, but a good swap is always, they can keep working after, but just use. Oh, actually, he has a below deck ability, so. Um, where are you, E data? We just saw him. Oh. There he is. So after 51, you can use E-data with Picard Beverly or Pike Moreau and just keep on grinding, and won't it'll function much like um, or you'll be able to kill approximately as many hostiles as you could. Um, he doesn't work the same way, but he's still a pretty good option for continuing to use Pike and Moreau and Picard Beverly even after 51. So the other crew, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and this is a really good crew, but you got to get the hang of it. So um, I think if you get the what the ship that uses the venom, um, anyway, that refinery, the Mantis. I think the Mantis gives you access to these officers, but there's other ways to get him as well. But this is Pike, but he's a different Pike. He's Strange New Worlds Pike, and once you got him in the captain's seat, I just go to group, and that'll put all the people in his group. Pelia, I really like below decks. Um, we'll talk about below decks in a few minutes, but Pelia increases isolated defense by 25%. There's a lot of isolated damage officers, but isolated defense is much more rare. And Pelia has it. Excuse me. So I like to put her below decks because of that ability. And then I love Nurse Chapel as well. She increases isolated cascade damage by 5%, but 40% at rank 5. If you tier her up, she'll be a beast. Um, okay, so but let's go back to the bridge. So you'll notice because I am sorting by group, down below it puts to the front of the line anyone who's in his group. Um, it doesn't really matter who you pair him with because they're all going to give approximately the same synergy. Um, there is another Strange New Worlds crew, but I don't have Sam Kirk. You'll notice. Actually, I don't want to put Himmer in there. Um, and I don't want any of the blue ones. But you can pair him with any of these red ones. Or he does work with, say, Pelia in there. I just don't want to give up Pelia below decks. Um, so a good strategy is to use him with um, with one of these red officers, and that gives him some synergy. I prefer using Una because she speeds her officer abilities. She makes your ship go a little faster. And in fact, I also put Dane under there because his below deck ability is he increases your ship's base impulse speed by 20. And it does make a noticeable difference when you have particularly two of these um, officers, and um, you your hull will still only last a certain number of hits, but you'll be able to do those faster, right? So it's more hostiles per hour if you've got a speed crew on there. Um, but the primary thing that you're looking for with all of these officers is the mitigation. It's not a lot; it's only 5%. But when fighting hostiles, he increases shield mitigation by 4%. And then his officer ability is when fighting hostiles, Pike decreases hostile shield mitigation by 10%. Then notice Sorry, yeah, she speeds it up. But the real key to this crew is who you put in that third slot. It makes a huge difference. And there's four people, and there's four different types of ships. So who you put in this third slot, suppose you're grinding surveys, you want Hemmer in there. Why? Telepathic result, no, sorry. Hammer increases armor, shield, deflection, and dodge by 800% of total health when in combat with hostile survey ships. Then what you want to do, well, I'll talk about it in a second. Ahura. So, so if you're granting surveys, you want to have Hammer in there. If you're battling battleships, you want to be in an interceptor and you want to use Ahura. And she'll increase armor, shield, deflection, and dodge by 500% of total attack. Get to that in a second. Then you can use Spock. Suppose you are battling an interceptor. Well, you want to be in an explorer. So these work off of the battle triangle. You want to be in an explorer and you want to hit interceptors with Spock. And then the last one is Ortegas. And she increases armor, shield, deflection, and dodge by 500% of total health when attacking explorers from a battleship. So you're on the battleship. Okay. You're on the battleship and you are hitting explorers. Okay. It's a complicated crew setup, and you got to be on the right ship and you've got to be hitting the right hostiles, but it is very effective. Now, here's the thing. Let's say you're using her. Okay, so we need to talk about how to set up your lower decks. Now, I've already shown you lower decks officers, and they have below deck abilities. They work for different ones. So, like, let's look at a Cheb. You're just going to have to go in there, and you can say on round start against players if on a ship with no state. So you wouldn't use him against a hostile or against an armada. You'd use him only if you're battling another player. So some of them are for mining. Here, like, let's look at DePaul. Well, she increases the ore mining speed by 50% of base. Not going to help you if you're battling hostiles, right? But it will help you with mining. So you're going to want to just look at these. But that's for the officer abilities. Now, sometimes, let me just back out of here. Nope. I think Beverly does. Let's go to Beverly. Assign officers. So let's clear out. Oh, let me show you. First of all, Beverly, when fighting hostiles and armadas, Beverly Crusher increases armor, shield, deflection, and dodge by 150% of the defense of all officers on the ship. So look over here. On the far right hand side of your screen, you can see attack, defense, and health. And remember, she's defense, she needs the defense to be high because she's going to amplify that, right? So you want to stack these with defense officers. So you can go here and sort by defense, and then you can say, aha, Mavery and Grush. There you go. Look at that. Now it's stacked for defense. I've got defense as high as I can get it. And that's going to help me. Um, Now, you'll want to play around with it. Mavery and Grush are pretty great, but suppose you wanted to put someone in there like, um, let's go to LaForge. Yeah, now he has a lot of defense, but his overall power is not that high. So you're probably better off, and even sometimes Grush is worth replacing. I wouldn't replace Grush with Badgie, but I would replace him. The below deck abilities are usually going to be more valuable than the amplification based on defense or attacker health. So, and you can sort by below deck, and you'll notice, I'll select Echeb just so you know who I'm talking about. I wouldn't want to use him on a hostile grinding crew, but you notice Echeb, the lower left-hand corner, his icon is kind of like bolded. I don't know what you would say it. But then let's go over to a non-below deck officer and compare the icons. Let me see if I can start. Badgie is, here we go. So compare Beckett. Oh, this is good because they're both command. So you can see the difference. They have a border around them. So Beckett is a below deck officer and Saran is not. And notice the difference in the icon. So that's how you can tell just visually which ones have a below deck ability. And usually, as long as it's a combat ability, you're better off with having a below decks officer. But you still might want to get your defense as high as you can. Oh, there's Suitor. He increased it by that much. Let's see what Enterprise E Troy does. Oh, she didn't increase it by that much. So you can kind of play around with these even still and try to max out your defense or get it as high as you can. And that's the below decks officers. And I think that's a good intermediate guide to crewing. I think I've shown you four. I could show you one last. Do I want to show you this? Why not? I'll show you one other. My experience is this one is not um, one of the better crews, but you can try it out. It's worth giving it a try if you. Where is Epicard? Oh, you know what? Here's something you can do. If you know someone's in a group that you want, below deck officers. All you have to do is find them. If they have a below deck ability, sometimes they're easier to find. Because otherwise you're scrolling through 200 different. You can put them in the captain's chair just for a second. Then you go, once they're in the captain's chair, then you rank them by group. Aha. That's the one I'm looking for. So this E. I do use E data a lot with other crews. But you can also put them in their own crew. And it is an isolytic. It's another isolytic. Um, oh, this is a rewards crew. Or it's a reward. So you get the rewards from. You increase the rewards gained from hostiles and armadas by 60% of base with E Picard. And his crew, yeah, it's just. I haven't had much success with it. Maybe I need to tier him up a little bit. He increases the isolytic cascade damage, but it's only by 3%. Data amplifies that. Um, and then if you get Troy in there, she reduces the opponent's shield health by 400% of officer attack at the beginning of each round. So there's the mitigation. It's got some damage, some mitigation. On paper, it seems like it would be a decent crew. I'd probably